Welcome to the podcast. My name is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest, and I live here in Austin, Texas. I've had the gift of recovery since December the 27th of 1972. And the purpose of these podcasts is to go deeper into the spirituality, the history, the psychology of 12-step recovery. I want to thank everybody for the donations that are keeping the ship afloat here. It really is appreciated. Keep up the good work, guys. My guest is Laura Swann. We are discussing a book that she recently wrote. It is titled Men and Emotions. It's a Thing. And I've put a link to that in the show notes. So that's what we're doing for this series is kind of going through her book chapter by chapter and trying to learn a little bit more about men, the emotional lives we lead or don't lead, okay? And some strategies. That's what we're going to be looking at today. Strategies for living a more full emotional life. Laura has taught at several colleges and universities in the Austin area. And in addition, she's trained and certified in doing trauma work and a Daring Way facilitator therapy developed by another Texas therapist, Brene Brown. So welcome back to the show, Laura. It's good to have you with us again.
Thank you, Bill. We're excited to be here.
Good. Well, we're beginning chapter 4 in your book. It states when we don't take time to pay attention and connect to our emotions and feelings, they have a strange way of resurfacing when we least expect them to. Emotions are our compass, our guide. They provide us with important information. They will persist until they get heard, and how they get heard isn't always the way we want. Note to self, it is helpful to listen. It sounds like step 10 inventories needs to be included, keeping a sharp eye and a close ear attuned to what's going on in our emotional lives.
Absolutely. I love your parallel to step 10. I think I think that that's right on, because when somebody really does that inventory and look at that and talks to their sponsor about it or just sits with that, it helps them stay more aware of their emotions. It's stopping and pausing and checking in with their emotions.
One of the AA pioneers said it very nice. He said, if we don't watch, we don't know what the hell to pray for. That was always one of my favorite sayings. So you got to watch ourselves. And that, for me, two-way prayer is what I'm all about. And that's a necessary part of the process. I must sit and watch and see and feel what's happening in my emotional life.
Yeah, it's important. When we don't do that, I mean, in AA, you hear people saying it all the time, the stuff or the shit comes out sideways when we're not paying attention to that. And it's very true. It can come out physically in our bodies. It can come out in ways that we're not happy with, whether you and I've talked about spewing. We've talked about shutting down. Brene Brown kind of refers to this little saying, or we either, bow up, which is kind of like the, getting really angry and getting ready to spew, or we retreat. And
yes.
Neither one of those are very healthy ways to react to when our emotions are trying to tell us something. So the best way is how you described it, of being able to sit and listen and use those emotions as our compass. What are these emotions trying to tell me? What's my opportunity to learn here?
Yeah, we stopped fighting everything and everyone, including our emotions.
Right. Well, and I think the big deal of that is that, at least with a lot of the clients I see, and I speak for myself in my own personal journey, is that the happy emotions, the joy, whatever,
Right.
those are easy to connect to and they're easy to celebrate. It's the challenging emotions, it's the hard emotions that are the ones that we don't necessarily want to experience. And those emotions are the ones that we, push down or ignore, or when they're knocking at the door, we don't pay attention to that.
You list a number of strategies. We're moving on, I think it's chapter 4. You list some 19 strategies in this chapter. And we're going to break the list down into 2 episodes so we have plenty of time to focus on each one. Can you tell us why you chose these particular strategies? Because you say there are a great many others you could have selected.
Yeah, I love that you asked this question because there are a ton of strategies out there. And in the little preface before I start talking about each strategy, I talk about that a little bit, how difficult that was for me to choose the 19, because there are a lot more than this. People do all kinds of things to help manage their emotions. So I chose these based on my personal experience as well as the clients I've worked with, especially the men. What are some of the best ways that men have learned to manage their emotions?
Number 1 in your list is therapy. Why do you think this is a good place to start?
I put therapy first because I really think that person doesn't know how to connect with their emotional self can be daunting.
Yeah.
To figure out how to do that. And having a guide or having someone come alongside you that can ask you the prompting questions that can help you get curious in those 9 steps that we talked about last week. For someone who's not connected to their emotions, those 9 steps are not real natural.
Mm-hmm.
They're not, something that they've been practicing. And so it takes a while to practice those on a regular basis, and therapy does that. Therapy incorporates it implements those 9 principles that we talked about last week.
It can be a professional therapist, or it can be someone else who is more emotionally connected themselves and helping others kind of join in that journey.
I agree with that. The only caveat that I say to that, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, is you don't want to get someone who's real close to the problem. You want a neutral person, like,
Right.
your mom or your best friend may be great with connecting to their emotions and understanding, and they're a really good ear, but they're also very emotionally connected to you.
Right.
And so their bias could show up. And so neutral. Yes, choosing a neutral person. And that's what's so wonderful about a therapist. And that's why they emphasize a therapist should not have a personal relationship the same, time that they're working with the client, because you want to stay very neutral.
Right. Right. That's important. The second element is, and this is you break this one down quite a bit, support, finding the right support. What is that piece about?
Back in the very first episode, you and I kind of talked a little bit about my story and some of the challenges that I went through. And I talked about doing that with no support and how difficult that is. And we also just briefly touched on the research that supports when a person goes through something that's really difficult and they have support, the outcomes are far greater. When a person is alone, the outcomes are more challenging. So support comes in so many flavors. Think about it like Baskin Robbins, Ben Jerry's, it comes in tons of different flavors. I mean, it could be the dance group. It could be therapy. It could be the basketball team that, a man is connected to, or it could be their chess game, but just any type of support where within that group, there is a level of trust, vulnerability, connection, those elements that are important in supporting each other.
You list in looking for a trusted person and a trusted place. In two-way prayer, we'll get to this in the meditation piece, but to access the emotions, they can be very threatening, very scary. And so finding a trusted person with whom I can be more vulnerable, finding a trusted place. It's like when you go to your therapist's office or you go to a prayer place. It's quite similar. You loosen up, you let go of your guardedness. It's safe. It's safe. So you list a number of things: consistency, commitment, confidentiality, empathy, vulnerability, and no judgment. Can you walk us through those? Because I think they're important. Consistency. Start with that.
Consistency is key in whatever support mechanism you're using.
Mm-hmm.
It is key. You're not going to go to therapy once or twice and then you're done. Or you're not going to go exercise once or twice. I wish it worked that way.
I feel better. I feel better. Now I'm done. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I wish it worked that way because that would be great if we could do something one time and then all of a sudden we're done. But consistency is key. That's what I tell my men in the men's group. Whenever I have a new man who's joining, and first thing I talk about is consistency. I say, listen, this is not a drop in. This is not one of those meetings where you decide, I really want to watch the such and such game or something on TV.
Right.
This is consistent. And not just for you, because I'm asking you to show up for the other men in this group.
Right.
Because you now become part of their support mechanism. And when you don't show up, it changes the dynamic. And so commitment is huge in whatever we are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Consistency, commitment, vulnerability. There has to be a level of vulnerability for a person to be able to be honest about their feelings, have that safe place that you talk to. And I love that word. And I do think it's one of the things, Bill, we've talked about this on one of the last episodes, that men haven't had that platform to have that. I mean, it's never really until recently been okay for men to go to therapy or men to join a men's group. There were so many stereotypes and stigma connected to that. And that is loosening up in a lot of ways. And the effort in doing that is coming from a lot of different avenues, which is great.
Confidentiality.
Yeah. And I remind the men in the group and I remind my clients, what is said in here stays in here. And, here, right? It's important that they know that that's a confidential place and that they're not going to, 2 weeks from now go somewhere and hear something that they shared come up.
And the last one was no judgment.
And we're back to that no judgment. I'm so big on no judgment. We talked about that last week. Judgment really doesn't serve any purpose. There is a big difference, and I talk about this in the strategies, between judgment and healthy personal evaluation or self-examination. We have to be able to sit with self, own our mistakes, own our challenges, own that to grow and understand ourselves and get better. But when we judge ourselves, we just stymie the process of any type of growth because we're stuck in this negative self-talk. Why did I do that? Was it I shouldn't be feeling this way? My sponsor's going to be let down. I'm going to let my family down. You're stuck in that negative self-talk.
People are very disconnected, and I wonder if they're not more disconnected today than ever before. We've got places to hide, television, social media stuff, supposed to connect people when it came out, but it seems to be having an opposite effect. It isolates many people in a number of ways. And you quote the Harvard longitudinal study. I did a series on that with the fellow who was in charge of it.
Wow.
His book. It reported a strong correlation between having healthy connections to living a long life. Why do you think that is?
Golly, I just think connection is huge.
It's
I,
huge.
I think that it feeds our soul. I think it helps give a purpose. I believe God wanted us to be in connection. And I believe it's one of the most important elements of, earthly, whatever, is to be in connection with other people, whether it's serving other people or connection in our own vulnerability or connection in friendship, whatever it is. I believe we are meant to be in connection.
I think it was brilliant of Wilson when he wrote Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs.
That's right.
It's all about reconnecting with the three major parts. I've got to reconnect with God. I've got to reconnect with my deeper self, and I've got to begin the process with at least one other person.
God, I love that, Bill. Yes, and it is this thing about, being seen. When we are in shame and a lot of negative feelings, especially shame, when we are in that place, we want to hide. We don't want to show up for our men's group. We don't want to show up for a sponsor. We don't want to, because we're trying to hide whatever it is. We don't want to be seen in our authentic self. Or if we do show up, we're constantly figuring out how we're not going to let people see that part or this part or covering it up. So I love that third person and one other human being, because you're starting that process
Right.
of being seen. And when you do that fourth step, sometimes those can be a doozy. And when you do,
you're uncovering all the secrets.
Right. Yeah. And hopefully you're doing a really thorough job of that. So you do find freedom. So starting it with another person is the beginning of, oh my gosh, I can do this and I'm still accepted into this society.
That's the key word. When I did my fifth step, my sponsor said something brilliant, I thought. Well, of course, sponsors are always brilliant, especially that first one, But he said, I can't forgive you because you haven't offended me, but I am here to accept you. That opened that door for me, that another human being is going to accept the parts of me that are unacceptable to me.
Yeah.
You see? And I'm going down the basement and I'm pulling those up and I'm experiencing acceptance, which was so important.
Golly, I love that story, Bill.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me read the quote from Brown, because I think it's a nice one. She says, owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love, belonging, and joy, the experiences that make us the most vulnerable. Only when we are brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of light.
Powerful, isn't that?
Very powerful.
And that just sums up what we've been talking about in this support, doesn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's hard to own those creepy things that are in the basement sometimes.
But they have a gift. Each one has a gift if I can sit with it long enough and discover what it is. I went there for a reason. I went to alcohol and drugs or food or whatever the addiction might be for a reason. It did something for me. What was that something that it provided, at least for a while? Because I need to know that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
The next one kind of surprised me. I liked it. You list distraction, and you say our distractions aren't all bad. Yay!
Yeah, I love that because so many times we're told or we believe or we get it from somewhere that distraction is a bad strategy. And
Right.
it's really not, but it has to be used. I talk about this in the book. It has to be used in a healthy way. So if we are always distracting and always running from emotions, no. But if we are helping compartmentalize, because the other part of that, Bill, is we don't want to be in these challenging or difficult emotions 24/7. That's really
Exactly.
unhealthy.
It's
And
too much.
yeah, and it gets to the place where it is part of being a really high level emotionally skilled, intelligent person is being able to be in that wise mind more, and you have more control of driving the bus versus the emotions of driving the bus and constantly spinning in your head. And so all day long you're in that challenging. And that's not healthy either. So and I talk about a little strategy in the book of how to know when too much or too little. And one of the things I say is that it's great to do what we just talked about in strategy number 2, sit with our emotions, evaluate them, look at them. If we can, at that point, make a plan. What's the next right thing to do? And then that's it. We're done. Whether that's a 10-minute or a 30-minute or the hour piece, we're done. Then we go on about our life. And we sometimes need a heavy distraction. Maybe sometimes it's getting the guitar out and playing some music or turning on a record, or maybe it's going for a run or calling a good friend and not talking about that, the challenging as much as talking about something fun and light and but artwork, anything that can distract you from not letting the emotions be in that driver's seat of the bus.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Got it. Next is exercise, because you've got an extensive background in exercise. And what's the connection with the body,
Yeah.
the body-mind connection? Because I think that's what you're getting at here. Huh?
Exercise was a lifesaver for me, unbeknownst to me. I just, at the time, I had no idea how much it was helping manage my anxiety. Today, I'm very aware of that. And I use exercise as a strategy all the time. The connection between the body is that challenging thoughts and feelings, you can think about them as, I don't really like the word negative, but it's just energy inside the body, right? Everything in our body is molecular, right? And so you can have this energy inside your body. And when you exercise, you allow energy out, and then you bring in more positive energy through the release of the chemicals that happen during exercise, the endorphins and kephalins, the serotonin. Those chemicals are released during vigorous exercise. So you have an exchange, bad going out or challenging going out, and good happening inside.
It's an important piece each of us needs to incorporate to our own abilities,
Right.
Don't leave it out. Don't leave it out. Creative arts, and you use an important word here. You say we can express our emotions through creativity. Can you share a little bit more about that?
God, one of the best examples is a really good friend of mine. Her son died of a heroin overdose. And she began she'd always been a bit of an artist, but she began to really pour some emotional energy into her art, and which of her art reflected how she was feeling, what was going on in the family, and how the other pieces of her family were being pulled apart, how they were mended, and she expressed a lot of that through the artwork. And then, is kind of a bonus, she would, not really intentionally, because she was very humble, this beautiful woman, but people would come over and they say, "Oh my gosh, look at this piece of art. Tell me about that." And she would begin to describe. That was at the time right after, my son died, and I was feeling so heavy, and that big black walk that represents this. And that was her. She expressed it through her artwork, and then she got to talk about it on top of that. So it was a really cathartic way to release some of that energy and some of those emotions around the death.
You don't have to be good at it. It's not like I have to be a good artist. If I can use that medium to express the emotions that are going on inside of me. You can also find some connectedness, in her case, her son's spirit, that there's a way to join with, even in the absence of, that
Yes.
art makes possible.
Yeah. I had another gentleman who had a lot of challenging negative energy, and he would rock climb. So I asked him, I said, "How can you get creative with that? How did you express your emotions in your rock climbing?" And so he came up with this interesting way of being aware of emotion. And as he reached for a rock to take that emotion, and he put the emotion into and onto that rock. And then he would, reach for another book. And it was really kind of a very creative way to leave some of his emotions, that challenging energy, to be intentional about, this is my energy, and I'm leaving it here at this rock climbing gym, so that, I'm not carrying it with me.
Yeah, I remember when I first started doing two-way prayer, and I was running a little group, and a woman was in the group. She was doing really well, and then her son died of a drug overdose. And I said, "Oh, she's not going to come back," and I understand that. But she did, and she wrote to her son and listened to her son speak to her, telling her he was safe. She said, "I couldn't have gotten through this without two-way prayer." So whatever the medium may be, it does connect us to the vitality of life and things that we need to be joined with. Yeah, imagination, I think, it's very underrated. Turn it loose, and it helps us to express those emotions, those bonds that we have difficulty putting into words.
I have so many clients that do writing, whether it's journal or a specific assignment. They'll write about their certain emotions, or write about an event that happened to them, and bring it into therapy. And that is a form of creativity as well.
It is.
And it's a form of, it's very cathartic. The main goal is we just don't want to hold all that inside of us, that negative energy. When we're able to let that out, it provides and creates new space.
Right.
And, I was working with a gentleman the other day, and he said, "Oh, I just don't have any energy or space." And I thought, we talked about it. I told him, I said, "You're carrying so much right now. And lots of what you're carrying really doesn't belong to you. You're carrying a lot of family stuff that really needs to kind of go back to family members, or you need to let it go. But, and when you are able to do that, it will create more space within you to be able to fill that with more positive and beautiful things.
When I was in treatment 50 some odd years ago, 50 plus years ago, uh, they were encouraging us to dance. Well, the guys in the group were saying, "Oh, come on, this is just nonsense." Well, years later, it's like, okay, now I finally get what they're trying to do here.
Right.
Can you express in your body things that are going on that are deep within, and you have difficulty expressing, but you're getting them out. You're getting
Yeah.
them out in some way.
Yeah. Well, in music, I talk about music in the book too. Music and singing and humming,
Right.
all of those things affect our body in a way that helps calm the anxiety center.
Right. Drumming, men's
Drumming.
circle of drumming.
Yes, it's a vibration. Again, think about energy. I know when I attend church and we sit in the front, and we kind of have a bit of a groovy church, and there's lots of guitars and drums. And when I sit right there on that front row, I can feel that vibration move through my body.
Right.
And it really, I mean, I can feel the difference of when I
Sure.
leave than when I first walk in that door. And I know that it has to do with the energy that is being created in my body and the physiological changes that are happening in that anxiety center of being calm.
I was working as a chaplain in a men's treatment center some years back, and I always brought a boom box, a good boom box,
Yeah.
with that played good music, and I would very carefully select the music. And before we'd have a therapy session, we would listen to some music, and it just opened people up.
Yeah.
I wish we would do that in 12-step,
Yeah.
I did visit a program in upstate New York many years ago, started by Tom Powers. Bill Wilson was his sponsor, and he was a good writer, great writer, and he helped him write the 12 and 12 and
Right.
AA Comes of Age. And he started a sort of a commune in upstate New York. And they had where they were really going to work the steps, they were quite intense. And they had a Saturday night meeting, and I went to the meeting, and about for a half hour, everybody in the group learned an instrument. And for about a half an hour, they sang and played music before they had their regular 12-step meeting. And it was marvelous.
I love that.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And they did a combination of hymns and drinking songs. And the energy, he said, well, that's all we know. He said, and the energy in the room, I mean, you could just feel it build and build and build. And then they were opened up and ready to share, I suspect, at greater depths than had they not done the music.
Yep. I'm sharing my book. Under the little music part in this chapter about a young client he started using some form of drug when since he was 11 years old. And I got him, I guess, maybe around 1920. And we did not connect, Bill. I mean, we sat in that at my office for the first 3 visits. It was such a long 50 minutes, and it was so hard to connect. Finally, one afternoon, I asked him, I said, so what do you do for hobbies, or what do you, and he says, I make music. And I said, oh, interesting. I said, do you have any music you could ever bring to a session?
Mm-hmm.
And we can, you can share it with me. And so the next couple of sessions, we sat on the floor and he shared that music with me, and he was so thrilled. And from that time on, he began to open up and he began to share, and just felt so much more comfortable. that music connected us.
Right. Exactly.
And it was a beautiful time for him. And we built a wonderful relationship over the next couple of years.
Wonderful. So speaking of that, sitting with difficult emotions, you said most of us are very uncomfortable doing this, which was the case with the client you just talked about, eh?
Right? No,
Yeah.
I mean, really and truly, I guess when you get better at it, it does become easier. I know for me personally, there was a point in my recovery, and especially my emotional sobriety, that I realized my emotions were not going to kill me. And it was such a turning point for me. I thought, okay, they're going to be really scary. They might make me run. They might make me not want to see people. They might make me overwhelm me. They might make me cry at inappropriate times or yell or spew, but they're not going to kill me. And I need to learn how to manage these more appropriately. And so sitting with emotions is a difficult task when you first begin. And that's why in the book I say, start in short periods of time.
Right.
Start at 2, 3, 4 minutes and just sit with the emotions. And what am I feeling now? Where do I feel in my body? How heavy does it feel? How I feel? Is it moving around about my body? Is it just localized in one place? But just to be able to sit with those difficult feelings and know that they're not going to take you over, that you can manage it, is a huge win.
Or if I can't manage it, that's when I can turn to the higher power.
Absolutely.
You know?
Yes.
As that's why 10 precedes 11. You have to sit with what's going on, and then you know what to pray for.
Yes.
Very important.
Yeah, great parallel. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people often miss that. Each step flows into the next. It's the completed action of the step before. So if you are sitting with the emotion and you feel it's overwhelming you, then you have what you need to go to God with in your prayer time. I'm feeling overwhelmed. Please help me. Boom, boom, boom. And then you find the source of strength outside of self, or maybe in a different part of self that we're not so aware of. I do want to talk about silence. People in 12-step, I find, are often very uncomfortable with silence. When you're in a group and silence enters the group. I was leading a group and we went for 20 minutes with no one saying a word. It was the longest bit of silence that I had ever experienced in a therapy group. But I tell you this: when somebody spoke, it better not have been BS. It had better be real, or 8 guys were going to jump on them.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I tell groups all the time, hey, I love silence. I don't have a problem with silence because when we're sitting in silence, many, many times we're reflecting, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It can be a healthy thing.
It can be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can be hiding in the silence too.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Or you can be sinking into it. It goes either way. Speaking of sinking, number 7 is yoga and meditation. Talk about that.
Well, yoga and meditation, they have a lot of components that we've been talking about, right?
Yep.
Yoga is very slow pace, but it's also can be very tense, not tense, you have to be strong. Yoga is not for the, weak person.
It's body-centered.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah, it's almost a form of prayer that is body-centered.
Yes, very much so. And it helps us move through movements being very mindful and being very conscious of what we're doing. And it also helps us sit. Most yoga classes and instructors may sit at the beginning and sit at the end, where there's a little bit of meditation at both. And anytime we deep breathe, which we do a lot in yoga and meditation, focus on breath, that vagus nerve helps calm or to reset that vagus nerve that deep breathing does. And that is connected to anxiety center. It's the same thing with humming or singing or the instruments, the vibration. It affects that part of our body, that vagus nerve that will help calm the body. So yoga and meditation, that's why it works really well, is because it helps reset and calm the body.
So let me see if I'm getting this right. So next time, I'm speaking to the listeners out there, you're feeling very anxious, to sit quietly and to hum. To hum would bring about some element of peace, of restoring a sense of connectedness and control of what's happening, rather than being overwhelmed as some of these emotions can do to us.
Yes. And think about it. It makes sense why so many people, when they meditate, they might use a chant.
Yes.
Or whatever their chant is, and repetitively, say that chant, because it is that humming. It is that act that helps calm and reset that vagus nerve.
Sink into it.
Let
it do its work.
Yeah.
You know? The thing I hated when I came into 12-step and I looked around at the slogans on the wall, there was one that said, think, think, think. I wanted to tear that one apart, The last thing I needed to do was think. I was stuck in my thinking, one more thought,
Right. That's
one more thought.
exactly. I love that you bring that up, because it is such a balance. It's such a balance. I hope that I have stressed that enough throughout these podcasts. We don't want to be in our feelings and our emotions all high, and we don't want to be think, think, think,
Right.
So finding that balance is important. And for individuals, if you haven't ever done that before, of being mindful and aware, start slow and work and build up to it. It's the same thing with meditation. You hear people come out of treatment all the time. They say, oh, that meditation was so horrible, I could do 1 minute. And now they're up to 15 or 20, or some are up to an hour.
Jung sent a patient once to spend time by himself for 20 minutes each day, and then come back next week and tell him how he did. He came back the following week and, how'd you do, Fred? Well, I did really well. First week, I listened to a Beethoven symphony, and all by myself. And the second week, I strummed on the guitar all by myself. He said, no, I just wanted you to be with yourself. He said, my God, I couldn't do that. I couldn't stand that. And Jung said, well, how do you think we can stand being with you if you can't be with you?
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So acceptance. Acceptance is number 9. This is a huge one. A lot to be said here. And we're going to end with this. But can you just generally break down acceptance? Why do you consider this a strategy? What's that about?
I think that especially in the 12-step program, you have to learn to live life on life circumstances.
Life's terms, yeah.
Yeah,
Terms.
You have to learn to live life on its terms. Like, there are not many people that come into recovery that don't have a lot of control issues. They want to control lots of things, and controlling their emotions is one of them, right? I mean, they've controlled their emotions, whether it's through a substance or a behavioral addiction or whatever it is. They could use that to manage their emotions for a long time. They'd use distraction, they'd use sex, whatever they use to manage a lot of their life. And so acceptance is learning how to be comfortable with the circumstances and the terms of life. Sometimes we're given things that are more challenging, and sometimes we don't like the things that drop into our life. But and we spend a lot of time trying to manage it and control it and to, make it go away versus more acceptance of what is it here to teach me? What can I learn from this? What's the next right thing to do? Praying about it, trying to understand it. All right, God, what am I supposed to do with this? That is more what acceptance looks at. It's the whole serenity prayer, right? God, help me accept the things I can and wisdom to know the difference.
And courage to change. Let me read it because I want to break it down. God, grant me the serenity to accept. So we're talking about acceptance. Accept the things I cannot change. Courage to change the things I can. And the wisdom to know the difference. There's a balance there. There's a flow there. There's a not one over the other. These three are all connected, aren't they?
And yes, they're all connected for sure.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful prayer. I pray that quite a bit when I'm feeling that overwhelmed or when I'm in meditation or as a cleansing prayer, because I too, especially coming from a family that was full of chaos a lot of the time, I want to control things. I want things to be a certain way, and if all the little ducks are in a row, it helps my little central nervous system be a little calmer. And there's some good in that, but there's also some real challenge because, that's not living life on life's terms, and that's not acceptance. So I use that prayer quite a bit just to help me accept the things that I cannot change.
I had a sponsor, the same guy I was talking about earlier, who did my fifth step, and he talked about the we version of the serenity prayer. And I really like it because he said, we sit there in the meetings and we're trying to join with one another because we're so separated and isolated and all of that sort of stuff. And then we do this self-centered, God grant me the serenity. So he just in his own mind wasn't going to try to change the group because they never would, but in his own mind, he would do the we version of the serenity prayer. God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So, many of the strategies you list are trying to shift from a disconnected I to a more connected we. And that's half the journey right there, isn't it?
It is half the journey or a lot of the journey. And you'll notice if you were to take the 19 strategies that I talk about and you go back and you look at the 9 principles of how we connect to our emotions, you can see these strategies have those principles incorporated, whether it's all 9 of them or 6 of them or whatever. They have lots of those principles incorporated in those strategies.
Yeah. We have just a few minutes left, but in the little script I wrote, I did want to look for a moment at the second part of the Serenity Prayer, because I think there's a wealth of wisdom in that as well. So
How so?
Because I think it takes the acceptance theme that we're talking about in number 9. It takes it to a deeper level. So let me read it, and then we'll kind of break it down. the second part of the serenity prayer, living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardship as the pathway to peace, taking as he did this sinful world as it is, not as we would have it, trusting that you will make all things right if we surrender to your will, so we may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with you forever in the next. So one day at a time, even one moment at a time. How is that connected to our emotional health? Huh? It is, isn't it? I mean, it's allowing myself to be in the presence of emotions, not run from them, not be overwhelmed by them, but accept them moment to moment to moment. All right?
Yeah.
Very important. Huh?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I can see that. Yeah, I remember before I was even in recovery, I shared that story around going home with that friend of,
Yeah.
and one of the bumper stickers that her dad had on his door, never knew what it meant at the time, was one day at a time. And I remember thinking, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever read in my life. I mean, what do you do one day at a time? And for me, for a person who really felt like at the time I really needed control, not acceptance, and not living on life's terms,
Right.
but needed control, that was really uncomfortable for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We don't live in the now. We live in tomorrow or yesterday.
Yes. What's going to happen tomorrow? And how am I going to make this work? And what's going to do that? Yeah. I mean, it's very much around managing. And even for me, Bill, managing the past, making sure that someone didn't see whatever in the past or
covered over.
Yes.
Covered up.
Yeah.
Right. Accepting hardship as the pathway to peace. A lot of folks in recovery face some huge hardships and acceptance of those hardships as the pathway to peace. It's almost a contradiction.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I just finished a book and I gave it to one of my men in the men's group because talk about hardship. I mean, you know, obviously I'm not going to go deep into his story because I don't want to, the confidentiality piece. But there is a section in my book that I talk about his story a little bit where he lost a really important piece of his license. It's taken him probably 7 years to regain this, and he recently has regained it, and he's practicing again. But this book that I bought for him is called The Many Faces of Mama Love, and it's about a woman who has a substance use dependence problem, gets arrested. Life is just, and arrested in front of her kids, settled the police, and has tons of felonies. I mean, she has so much to clean up. And she's always been a writer and had a couple degrees in writing. And it took her 10 years to clean up that past and clean up that breakage. And I think with people in recovery, many times they get disheartened. After 2 years, they're like, oh my gosh, this should be done. Or I shouldn't have to deal with this. Or, that one day at a time, if she does it, all of those get, they get angry with that and they don't have the patience to wait it out and to continue to clean up that wreckage. So the book is great. I love the book. What was her name? I think it's Laura Jones or something like that, but it's The Many Faces of Mama Love. Good book.
Well, the thing that helped me was my first year of recovery was Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, meaning and purpose
Man's
of life.
Search for Meaning,
The
The Doctor and the Soul. The fact that he was finding meaning and purpose and a sense of acceptance in a concentration camp.
I know.
I mean, life was hard for me. It wasn't that hard. It was nowhere near that hard. So it was possible. It's possible.
It is possible. And I just reread that book about 2 months ago and haven't read it for really, years. And I just reread it, and it is so powerful. It's such a good book. If our listeners haven't read that book, if you're in recovery, it is highly recommend the book.
Necessary reading. Reading.
Yeah.
Taking this sinful world as it is, not as we would have it. All right. Now, sin's a dirty word. I understand that. You never hear that as a topic in a 12-step meeting. But I always substitute the word, we live in a broken world.
Yeah.
It's a broken world.
Yeah.
And some people have a whole lot more brokenness than others that they have to accept. When you sit with that, don't deny that it's broken. It is broken, but there is also within me the strength to endure the brokenness and the guidance to do what I can about it that day. What can I do about the brokenness this day, this hour, this minute? And that's where the emotional, I think, recovery really starts to work for us. It's possible. It's possible. It's hopeful too.
Well, I think that's why I know that one of the strategies I list in the book is reading and learning more. And I really believe, and it's why I talked about that book and that client, both of those just a minute ago, because those stories are encouraging.
Yeah.
Those stories give us power. They give us strength. And that's why I gave the book to the client of mine, because he was right at the very end. It wasn't real sure what was going to happen. And, everybody's encouraging him, just, hang on.
Hope. Give me some hope. Give me some hope. I don't have any hope. Looks hopeless.
That's right. And I believe that hope is what helps us keep going. And books, podcast, whatever it is, to find that encouragement and know that other people have been there and they've worked through that. And maybe they've worked through it in a year, or maybe it's like that author who took 10 years, or my client who it took him 7 years. So long time.
Yeah. I've worked with a lot of people who lost relationships with their children.
Okay.
And that was a prime motivator for them. And a number of them would write to the kid. The kids were bitter, and they'd write to them and get nothing back.
Yeah.
Write to them and get nothing back. And sometimes it can go on for years. And then one day, the kid is ready. And had they not stayed the course, they never would have had the relationship that they eventually had. It's tough. It's tough.
Well, and I would like to just say to all the listeners out there, if you are a person in recovery, especially early recovery, there is a lot of hope, and you've got to look for it, but it's out there. And there's a lot of people that have cleared the path for you. And you just have to be willing to get on the path and begin walking it yourself.
And the hope comes, it's your path. It's not my path in the beginning. There's not enough of me there, to really travel it by myself. But I look at you and I say, and this is where ego, I think, comes to our aid. If this idiot can do it, I certainly can too,
And that's just both of that, the book I spoke of and my client, felonies galore. Mean, come on. And I had a student of mine. This is such a great story. She was one of I think 4 or 5 back in whatever it was, the early 2000 and maybe 5, 6. She's part of the Center for the Students in Recovery, and she's one of 4 women in the engineering program. And she got towards the end of her program and was really struggling getting an internship because she had a number of felonies. And I told her, I said, do not throw the towel. Do not keep praying about this, keep doing this. We're going to figure out how to let you this, internship. And she did it.
She did.
She stayed the course. She had the group that gave her hope. Where she couldn't find hope, that group stepped in and gave her hope. And she's an electrical engineer, you know?
There you go. There you go. Lack of power was her dilemma, and now electrical. She's got power all over the place. There.
Too bad we can't take that power and just like, swallow it. And
That's what two-way prayer is all about. That's my deal. That's my deal. You connect with that power and let that power do for us what we can't do for ourselves.
No.
We've gotten halfway through the list of 19 strategies. If you'll come back next week, we will try to finish that off. I put a link to Laura's book in the show notes, and start working some of those strategies, folks. It's you ain't going to get well just sitting on the log. You got to take some action. So these are some actions that will definitely help you, especially the men, but not only the men, because these strategies apply equally well to women. I was thinking about that when I was going through them.
Yeah,
so,
I love that you brought that up. Mm-hmm.
Take the action.
Yep.
Okay, Laura, thank you so much. It was a pleasure once again having you on the podcast, and you come back next week, and we'll go 9. I guess this is 10 through 19. So we'll finish it up.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Phil. I appreciate it. Thank you, all the listeners.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you guys for listening. I do hope it was helpful, and if it was, tell a friend and keep coming back.